Thanksgiving planning always sneaks up on us. Every year I say I'm going to get ahead of it, and then I don't. Potlucks, the big family feast. But this year I'm keeping things easy and stress-free with Whole Foods Market. It's my one-stop shop for everything I need all month long. From quality organic produce to great prices on turkey and amazing deals on baking essentials. Plus, their 365 brand always keeps my pantry stocked with the basics without breaking the budget. And for the days when life gets too busy, their grab-and-go sides are a lifesaver. The creamy mashed russet potatoes and sea salt and cracked pepper green beans are perfect for potlucks, quick dinners, or last-minute Friendsgiving plans. Nobody needs to know I didn't actually cook it myself, right? I love browsing their produce sales for fresh ingredients to make casseroles and classic sides that taste like home. And if you want to skip the cooking altogether, Whole Foods Market Catering has you covered. From turkey to dessert, all made with the same better ingredients and high standards that you'd expect. Make sure to order by November 25th to reserve your bird, your sides, and your sweets. This Thanksgiving, save more, stress less, and make it delicious. All with Whole Foods Market. Shop everything you need for Thanksgiving now at Whole Foods Market. Oh, and happy Thanksgiving.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs, because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittleBitCulty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty.
Welcome back to A Little Bit Culty, everyone.
We are pumped about our guest today. Her name is Ellen Huet. She's been here before, but this is a deeper dive. Ellen is an award-winning journalist and author of the newly released book, Empire of Orgasm, Sex, Power, and the Downfall of a Wellness Cult.
Ellen was the first to blow the whistle nationally on the cult-like world of OneTaste, the company that promised enlightenment through orgasmic meditation, but delivered controversy, lawsuits, and an FBI investigation instead.
Ellen's dogged reporting didn't just uncover the bizarre and unsettling heart of OneTaste's operations, it set the stage for years of scrutiny, exposés, and a much-anticipated trial.
We dig into what first caught her eye about OneTaste in a sea of wellness crazes, how she tracked down sources and peeled back layers of secrecy, and what she discovered about the founder, Nicole Dadone's powerful hold over her followers.
Ellen's reporting shows how OneTaste sold orgasmic meditation as life-changing and healing, but how the reality was actually way messier, emotionally charged, and financially risky. I found OneTaste to actually be a really interesting blend of a lot of different cults, didn't you, Nip?
Yeah, a little dash of Ghislaine Maxwell in there as well.
Yes, and flirty flishing from Children of God.
And KR's playbook, really.
Of being a massive grifter, not dissimilar to Bentinho Massaro.
Yeah, there's a little fourth consciousness going on in there.
Little
little dash of that.
4D, four dimension. Oh, and some personal growth of Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
All the things.
Yeah, it's a smorgasbord.
Don't miss this frontline perspective on what made this group different and the same, and just how seductive and dangerous the pursuit of spiritual awakening can get in today's New Age marketplace.
Here's part 1 with Ellen Huet.
Ellen Huet, welcome back to A Little Bit Culty.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Last time you were here, we were just doing like a little bonus snapshot to hear your immediate thoughts after, was it the sentencing or the trial?
It was just the trial and the verdict. The sentencing has not happened yet.
Oh,
it
that's
actually
right.
keeps getting delayed. So I don't even know when it's going to happen. It could happen later this year or early 2026.
What is it leaning towards?
I think that's where we found Ellen last time, is that she got normally somebody like her would be out on waiting for sentencing.
Yeah, Nicole Daedone and Rachel Cherwitz were taken into custody the day after the guilty verdict, which I was not expecting. I have no idea what they were expecting, but it was definitely a shocking moment in the courtroom. And then, yes, that means that they've been in a federal jail in Brooklyn since June and are awaiting sentencing.
Wild. And honestly, I think Nippy would agree with this, when we had you on last, we had to sort of, we knew, at least in our opinion, kind of a classic cult, and obviously also provided value for many people, which we're going to get into. But I don't think we really understood. Like, now after reading your book, we're like, in my opinion, it's worse in terms of the level of manipulation.
I mean, I was shocked. Not much shocks me. We've been doing this almost 5 years. There's not a lot. There's like every now and then, but this one was like, wow.
She's worse than I thought.
Yeah.
It's complicated for sure.
It's complicated.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's like,
for those of you who are joining us and don't know what we're talking about,
yeah, we should probably
we'll do a little.
Totally.
You've been in this world for a long time. I've been in this world with you, with it in my ear. I've been listening to it with AI, your book. I know that your audio version will come out.
Gwyneth Paltrow's voice?
Yeah, it's not out yet. I don't know if you know this, but Gwyneth Paltrow does an AI voice on this app called Speechify. So I have Gwyneth Paltrow reading me your book.
It's in Paltrow tone?
Yeah.
And that's very funny for those who haven't read the book yet. Gwyneth Paltrow does make a couple appearances in the book. She becomes a big, she's obviously like the queen of wellness, and like her endorsement goes, 50 miles farther than anyone else's. And she, she like has Nicole Daedone on at her conference. She has her on her podcast. It's definitely like the biggest stamp of approval that they get in the late 2010s is like
wild.
Goop approved. Orgasmic meditation becomes Goop approved.
And female Joe Rogan.
And Tim Ferriss.
Yes.
Makes an appearance.
He's a big
Theo Vaughn.
Theo Vaughn. That one is my favorite celebrity Omer. And he's so funny when he talks about it.
I would have loved to have been in there.
Watching him learn how to stroke?
Actually, no, I take that back. Stroking sessions to me were disturbing.
I don't know if he was less famous. He talks about doing it I imagine 2016 or something like that. I don't know if he was less known. But yeah, Theo Vaughn has said publicly many times he studied orgasmic meditation for like 6 months.
He's been on our list to have on our podcast because of his evangelical upbringing. But now we have 2 things to talk to him about. So Theo Vaughn, if you're listening.
Theo Vaughn, if you're listening, I would love to come on your show and talk about orgasmic meditation. I think we would have such a fun conversation about it.
And also, I know we're just like whetting the appetite of our audience with a couple of like just random crossovers. We'll get into it, I promise. Catherine Oxenberg.
Yes. I'm curious to know. I don't know much about her. She makes a very brief appearance at an OM conference, but I would love to hear more.
Absolutely. We'll get into all that. We have a huge list. I don't know if you got my notes, but I've many notes. I have like the formal questions from our writing team and then like my notes, which are like...
I like seeing your notes. It's very raw.
Notes are a little more raw.
That's what I like to know, yeah.
Like golden pussy syndrome? What is that?
We'll get there.
Let's find out. We'll find out. Okay. But I just have to tell you, like, I've just been so immersed. We do a book a week. So we've had your entire book compacted in a week. So I'm just in the world of the vagina. So that's my preface. Tell us about your foray into OM.
Okay, so I'll start with a little background about like what is OneTaste, what is orgasmic meditation. So
thank you.
OneTaste is a company that was started in the early 2000s, 2004, by a woman named Nicole Daedone, and it's a sexual wellness education company. And they sell courses. And they were started in San Francisco. And what they sell courses about is a practice called orgasmic meditation. Orgasmic meditation is a 15-minute partnered clitoral stroking mindfulness practice. So the way it works is a stroker, usually a man, puts on a glove and some lube on his left index finger. And the strokee, a woman, lies down and gets naked from the waist down. And the man strokes the woman on her clitoris for 15 minutes in a pretty prescribed way. So it's very, they have certain like scripts that you say before you do it and you stroke in a certain way. And then after 15 minutes, like it's finished. They ring a bell. That's the end. And that's the end of the interaction. Like the woman doesn't owe the man anything. It's meant to be this like meditative practice in which both partners simply focus on the sensations in their bodies rather than trying to achieve any sort of like sexual goal. And orgasmic meditation was pitched as this wellness practice that was going to change your life. It was going to improve your sex, your relationships, bring you more connection and intimacy, get you more in touch with your intuition and your desire, give you more vitality, all sorts of things. And OneTaste was basically built around this practice. On the surface, they sold courses about how to do OM and then how to live a life that was more, orgasmically centered and all these things. And then behind the scenes, if you joined OneTaste and became much more involved in the group, it started to resemble, this is according to former members told me in my reporting, that it began to resemble more like a high demand, high control group. So a place where members who got really involved would leave their old jobs and start working for OneTaste instead, working in the sales department, selling more courses. They would leave their old homes and move into communal OneTaste residences, informal ones. So they would move into homes with other OneTaste students, where they would do the OM practice several times a day together. And then they would, gradually start distancing themselves from their friends and family who didn't really understand this orgasmic meditation thing, and then spend all their time with other people involved in OneTaste. And so for a lot of people, they might have just come and take a few classes and then left. And then for other people, they got very deeply immersed in the group and had a completely different experience. For some people, obviously, it was quite positive. And for other people, many people have told me in depth about how harmful this experience was. And even for those people, they were like, and there was a lot that I learned about it. So, as all your listeners know, it's a multifaceted thing. I think what I found fascinating about it compared to some other alleged cults is, first of all, that it was run by a woman, because I think a lot of these groups tend to be run by men, and that it was so unabashedly about lifting up the female orgasm. It was all about female pleasure, female orgasm. That's a pretty unusual topic that often gets sidelined or not given a lot of attention. And so I had this female leader, this very female-focused practice. And then the other thing that struck me that was interesting about it is that sex was really at the forefront, rather than a group that might have a different purpose that is advertised to the world. And then there's actually sex used as a means of control and manipulation behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that's a helpful starter.
That's a great starter.
Yeah, they did lead with the sex.
They were upfront about it.
And I will say that's part of why people were so drawn to it, because they were looking for sexual healing. And there aren't that many places you can go where people are going to talk openly about how to really get into the nitty gritty of improving your sex life. So a lot of people who were drawn to OneTaste were looking for a way to understand their sexuality, maybe because they had some sort of complicated history, or they just wanted to improve their relationships. And so I feel a lot of compassion for people who were drawn to OneTaste, because your sexuality is such a core part of you. And if you feel like there's something missing in there, you're going to be really interested in hearing what someone has to say. If they say that they have an answer, that is going to help you.
Absolutely.
It also normalizes it in a certain way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which it is, but it's also an area where...
So right for abuse.
Oh, hell can break loose.
Yeah. I was thinking as you said that about being upfront about it, there's always a bait and switch. So as you just said, there's in next game you presented one thing up front and then the sex was behind closed doors. With OneTaste, the sex was presented up front, but what's the switch? That was the bait. So what's the switch? What's the deception for not everybody? Because some people came, learned how to stroke and, open up emotionally and sexually and left. Where's the switch?
Well, learning how to stroke as normal in our jargon is to me
well, I mean,
a leap.
Right. But people come in and that's what they're being sold. At the intro night, you're saying, you're going to learn how to do this. You're going to feel this. And that's the exchange. So where's the switch? Where's the exploitation? Where does that? So if sex isn't behind closed doors, what's behind closed doors?
Again, in these long conversations that I had with former members, they would say that the switch is pretty subtle, but basically that what starts out as a promise of you're going to have more understanding of your sexuality, you're going to have a better grasp of this own part of your life. They would say that the more you got sucked into this group, the more it became that you would hand over your autonomy, especially around your sex life, to someone else, to someone above you in the group, whether that was Nicole, whether that was Rachel, some of the other leaders. And that control would then, be used to potentially for the company's gain, maybe rather than just your own benefit. And so I would say an overarching theme that a lot of people told me about was that they were told that certain activities within OneTaste were a means to personal growth. That was kind of the actual goal when you got more involved in the group. It was less about your sexuality, but just you're going to grow as a person, your sexual enlightenment is going to be enhanced if you do certain acts. And then that became a means to pressure people, allegedly pressure people into acts that they maybe wouldn't have done, but that benefited the company. So, a core example is there are a handful of women who, over the years at OneTaste, were asked to be the sexual handlers of an investor who was kind of the main financial backer of the company, especially in its early years. And there are women who have testified about this in court over the summer. This is like a big part of the criminal trial, is that these women were essentially, they testified that they were told or that they were asked to do this thing, and that within the teachings of OneTaste, it was kind of, there was like sort of all this philosophies that led them to believe that it would be like a spiritual honor essentially to do this, and or that they would benefit from being close to Nicole if they agreed to do this, that it was kind of like a position of honor, but not that it was something that they like wanted to do inherently. It just gets so complicated, and that's kind of what I am so fascinated about in this subject. But yeah, it's an example where like it was obviously to the benefit of the company that this man, this investor, was kept happy so that he would continue to financially support the company. And the main way that he was done that was by being given sexual favors by OneTaste employees. And part of the reason that OneTaste employees agreed to do this, again, according to what they've told me and how they testified, is that they were, taught these philosophies that led them to say yes to things that they might not have actually wanted to do, but because they were taught that it was like good for their spiritual growth.
Let's take a break from the cultiverse, shall we? Here's a word from our sponsors.
Nobody wants to pay rent, but if you have to, Built makes it worth it. Built is revolutionizing how millions think about paying rent by rewarding their members with points and exclusive benefits around their neighborhood every single month. You're already paying rent. Why not get something out of it? When you pay through Built, you earn flexible points you can use toward future rent, travel on hundreds of airlines and hotels, even your next Lyft ride. Built makes your whole neighborhood more rewarding. Earn extra points by grabbing dinner at your favorite local spot, get VIP perks at select fitness studios, and unlock exclusive experiences every month. Built turns one of your biggest monthly expenses into something that finally pays you back. Your rent's working hard. Shouldn't it be working for you? Earn points on rent and around your neighborhood, wherever you call home, by going to joinbuilt.com/culty. That's joinbilt.com/culty. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Enjoy. Okay, people, be honest with me. Have you even packed up your summer stuff yet? And seriously, the holidays are coming up. They are around the corner. This means it's officially time to get your home holiday ready. Extra seating for guests, cozy sheets and linens, new tableware that makes you look like you have your life together, and of course, decor. Wayfair is our one-stop shop for all things home, especially during the holidays. Thankfully, their Black Friday sale is happening all of November. You can score up to 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas, literally everything that you need to make your space feel festive and functional. These aren't some generic pieces you've seen 100 times before. Wayfair has unique styles that you can't find anywhere else, so your home actually feels like you. Wayfair has saved us when we moved into our new Atlanta home, and now one of our goals this holiday season is to furnish a new podcast studio with comfy chairs, some artwork plants, some paneling, and we are so excited to do all of that with Wayfair. Wayfair makes it ridiculously easy to order everything we need in one convenient place. So get fast, free shipping, even on the big stuff, and get help with the setup if you need it. Their new loyalty program gives you 5% back on every purchase, free shipping, and exclusive member deals. So deck the halls, refresh the guest room, and maybe finally retire that 2012 cookware set. Wayfair's got your back for the holidays. Don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday deals for up to 70% off. That's WAYFAIR.com. Sale ends December 7th. Happy shopping.
We love electrolytes in the Ames household. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My energy, mood, focus, everything improves. That's why I'm excited to try Drip Drop, our newest sponsor. It's not just about thirst, it's about keeping my body and brain running at full power. If you're feeling foggy, tired, or just vaguely dehydrated from life, meet Drip Drop. It's doctor-developed, fast hydration that actually works. It's got the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose for rapid absorption, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks. Translation, more focus, better energy, improved mood, even that I actually slept last night glow. It's trusted by firefighters, medical pros, and top athletes, and it tastes amazing. 16 original flavors, 8 sugar, all crave-worthy. I can't wait to use it every day, morning, post-workout, or when parenting feels like a cardio class, which it does. Plus, with flexible subscriptions, you're never caught without it. Wherever you are, gym, workplace, or household chaos, just stay dripped, not dried. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 25% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code Culty. That's dripdrop.com, promo code Culty for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Dripdrop.com and use promo code Culty now. Escape's over. Let's return to our regularly scheduled cult talk.
We're going to get into like the legal stuff and what happened with the trial. Maybe we'll save that for part 2. So I'm bookmarking that. But in terms of the the control aspect of that, what you're explaining might sound so absurd to someone who doesn't know anything about cults or who just heard about OneTaste for the first time. This is like kind of classic, actually, especially in the large group awareness trainings where the first thing that people agree to is playing full on, right? Like, it's not okay to say no. It's not okay to say no. In fact, the more that you say yes, the more willing, the more open, you're doing the work of the thing, whatever that is. It can be empowering, I'm sure, if you're like surrendering, which is part of the whole, in some groups, it's like next in master slave or guru chila. Like
surrender comes up a lot at OneTaste too. Yeah.
So when we ask survivors about their journey, we always want to start with like, what's good about it? So let's just backtrack a little bit before we get into all the culty shit that happened. Tell us a little bit about the vibe and like the info nights and like the excitement of something different in this space and what was exciting and appealing about OneTaste.
Totally. There's so much that is appealing about it. And I really wanted to make sure that people understand that because my number one goal in writing this book was for people to have some of the same realizations that I had over the course of these years of reporting, which is that the more I talked to people who had been involved in this group, the more I was like, wow, I really, it ends up in a pretty extreme place, but it starts out so understandable. Like, okay, so the experience of a typical person who might encounter OneTaste is, let's say you're like, this is actually drawn from some real details of other people who have been through this, but let's say you're young, you're interested in, you're really into yoga, you start doing yoga teacher training, and you're like doing the yoga teacher training and you're like loving it. And then one of the guest speakers comes in and is talking about holistic nutrition. And then they mention, orgasmic meditation. This also might be something that you might be interested in if you are interested in exploring your sexuality. And maybe you're a young woman who wants to understand her sexuality, but maybe she's had trouble having an orgasm, which, by the way, research suggests that 10 to 15% of American women have trouble like achieving a classic climax. Or maybe you're a man who struggles a little bit with performance anxiety in sex. Like, you want to better understand your sexuality, but there's just something, you feel like you have a blocker. And you hear about this group where it's like, these open-minded people get together and talk about this like mindful sexual practice that is going to offer potentially a new way for you to understand relationships, sex, connection between you and a partner. And they're having a like social event night on Wednesday night, and you're like, it's $10, might as well go. Maybe it's in New York or San Francisco or LA. And you show up and there's all these people who seem really radiant and alive, and they are so friendly, and they come and talk to you, and they like make strong eye contact, and you spend the first evening, like no one gets undressed, nothing crazy happens. You go to the first evening and you actually play communication games where people ask you these kind of probing questions about your life, and you feel really like, wow, it's really nice to have all this attention on me. I'm kind of curious what these people are like. They really seem to have something figured out. And they're so nice. They like invited me to come back and, help them volunteer for something this weekend or help them run a new course. Or, they asked me to come back and take like an introductory course, and that sounds nice. And then you go to the introductory course and they explain the philosophy of orgasmic meditation. And then they do a demo where they show the stroking practice for the first time. And you're, whoa, this is crazy. But like, it seems like something exciting is going on here, and I'm curious, and you want to find out more. And so like for a lot of people, that is their experience. They are drawn in because there's something that they are looking for, and this place seems to offer it. And the people who are there are like really compelling and charming, and they really know how to like bring you in. And then about the practice of orgasmic meditation itself, I would say there's a couple things that I think are quite appealing. First, like I mentioned, is that these 15 minutes are goalless. There's no goal except to feel the sensations in your body. And I think, again, for people who feel constrained or stressed out by the idea that like, when I have sex with someone, I need to perform in a certain way, or that I need to make them feel good in return, or that I need to have an orgasm, or I need to do this, it can feel quite relieving to have an experience where there are no expectations. It's really just whatever happens. And that's quite in parallel to a lot of mindfulness, this idea of like, you're just noticing what's going on. There's no goal in meditation. And I think like
everything you're saying is reasonable.
Yeah. For a lot of people who explore mindfulness, like I meditate a lot, like that is like a core part of it. So there is something really wise about that structure. And then the other part of orgasmic meditation, and this is, I think, mostly important for women, is this idea that there's no reciprocity expected. So after your stroker gives you 15 minutes of undivided sexual attention, you are free to go. You don't owe them anything. You don't even owe like a handshake, a hug, a thank you, whatever.
No
and
fist bump?
You can choose, but it's like they really do hold the borders of this container. That's what they like to call it. Like the container is held pretty strictly. And the idea is that, we're going to make a structure of sex where you're going to receive sexual attention, very intimate touch from someone, and you don't owe them anything. And I think for a lot of women, they had described to me when they first started doing orgasmic meditation, they were like, this was revelatory. This idea that you might be able to separate that from the baggage that usually comes with like sex and dating and all this stuff. So I guess I want to emphasize for listeners, like it really does have something quite valuable. And I think for those who do the practice a lot, many of them told me like it did help them sharpen their ability to feel sensations in their body. I totally believe that. It has a lot of parallels to meditation. And I like have experienced in my own life some of the benefits of doing a regular meditation practice and understanding how that changes your brain. Anyway, that was a little bit long-winded, but I hope that helps. I hope that helps explain to people like, there was a lot that was compelling about it.
We had a 5-day course that Sarah and I say there's still aspects of our 5-day that if you came and took it and went away,
Your life would be better.
It'd actually be okay.
I totally believe
Aspects.
that.
Yeah. Aspects.
Yeah.
And it had the appearance of guardrails. That's what was interesting about yours, is like it had the appearance of the structure, but there was no real science to back it.
They made so many guardrails. When Nicole branded and established orgasmic meditation and like the quote unquote container that went with it, part of her goal was to make this somewhat fringe practice be as appealing as possible and as safe sounding as possible to the average person. And so, of course, it has guardrails. Of course, it has these, prescribed boundaries, because I think otherwise people would be like, there's no way.
My first thought was, even with it, like, it's hard for me not to compare all the time with our experience with what we read about.
They're identical.
Well, there's a lot of similarities. And
Even the intro events were like, we ran our intro events kind of
very
like
similarly,
minus the
stroking. We didn't do that. But I was thinking about like, even in the 5-day or in the initial, like the trainings, what's good about it, there's these things woven in that are sort of like the foundations for later abuse. Language, but also like I personally, if somebody invited me to something like this, just who I am, and I don't think I'm a prude. I really don't. I don't think I'm a vanilla person or whatever, but I wouldn't feel comfortable. That would be a boundary for me there. But now you look at my experience with Nexium, 12 years in, I'm lying naked on a massage table, right?
It took you 12.
Took me 12 years. But I know what was going on in my head of like what I had to do it. There was a metaphorical gun to my head, right? Otherwise, all of these things. So I understand when people do things that they don't want to do and then talk themselves into it for the sake of the structure that they're in. I totally get that. I just personally, if it was presented to me up front, I'd be like, I'm happy for you. That's not for me, right? From the beginning.
Give me 12 years.
But I think that just like and it's totally different, but in the same way similar, just like the sashes and some of the weird, like unusual practices of Nexium were what Keith called the guardian at the gates. It kind of weeded out people that like weren't going to do that. I think, doing the oming right up front weeded out people like me who, whatever, had certain boundaries or autonomy around my body, whereas other people were more open and like, there's lots of different ways to approach sexuality and there's no right or wrong, right? I'm not saying those people are,
but you can't discount, say, 2 or 3 people that go do it and go, oh my God, Sarah, that thing you thought was weird? It's totally empowering. And next thing you know,
I know
you
people
don't
have
know,
done it. I know people have done it. I'm just saying, I think that it does weed out a certain type of person from the beginning.
You mean the extremity of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was someone I spoke to who had been involved in OneTaste who brought up the phrase taboo minimization to me, which is not like an academic term. It was just something that this person had read about. And she was like, this describes some of the experience that, she was saying this to me. She was like, it describes some of the experience that she had getting deeper and deeper in OneTaste, because basically, like, if you convince someone to do something that they thought was really taboo and they go along with it, like all of a sudden you've shifted. I don't know if you know the phrase, the Overton window, but it's kind of like the window of what's considered like reasonable or feasible. And you've shifted the Overton window of like, what is acceptable sexual behavior? And all of a sudden it's been shifted a little bit farther. And like, okay, well, you did that thing. Like, why not this? Why not this thing?
We called it line bending.
Yes. And so I think that can happen gradually. And like, you're totally right that it is going to weed people out. And there was an idea that came up frequently in OneTaste, this idea that like, sort of you might do something polarizing and some people are going to be turned off and they'll leave and that's fine. And then those who stay, they're more bought in and then you can
they're more committed.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think just keeping in mind that taboo minimization or that process can happen gradually and that it can, continue going. And so like, what you started off thinking you would do, that range of acceptable behavior is going to like grow.
That was rewarded.
Yes. Former members told me frequently that like, being on your edge, like doing edgy things, doing extreme things was rewarded. It was seen as being like a big player, which was a good thing. It was like being a big player, being like bold, knowing yourself by pushing yourself to your edges. That was like socially rewarded.
100%. I loved what you said multiple times is that even the trainers and I don't know the terms, the higher ranking people were taught teachers to push them all the way in or all the way out.
Yeah.
And the doubters are not good for business.
Yeah, exactly. This idea that like if someone is vacillating, basically like, people describe to me this idea that within OneTaste, if someone was seen as vacillating on the edge, like if they weren't sure, they were kind of not sure if they were in or out, it was beneficial to the group to either push them all the way out or bring them all the way in. And sometimes by pushing someone out, if they were hesitant, then they felt the loss of the group and then they would recommit themselves. So there's an example in the book. Yeah, there's an example in the book of like a woman who joins OneTaste because her girlfriend at the time is interested. So the girlfriend joins and then the woman is like a little hesitant and Rachel Cherwitz, one of the leaders of OneTaste, can sense that she's hesitant and she's like, she denies her the ability to move into the group residence. And in doing so, this woman is all of a sudden like, oh no, this thing that I wasn't sure that I want, all of a sudden it's been taken away from me. Now I feel desperate to get it back. And she kind of like recommits herself. She recommits herself.
Did you know that?
Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't know that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a sales term.
I mean, I think OneTaste is this interesting vehicle that was like, you can kind of cover a lot of the details of what happened in there in that book, but the patterns are so universal. And so it's like you see them show up in other groups. You see them show up, in sales trainings. You see them show up in the corporate world, like in kind of like toxic romantic relationships. I felt like it was this vehicle for these patterns that once you know them, that then if you were sitting and reading about something else, you'd be like, wait a second, I've seen that before.
They're Machiavellian. They've been normalized and called sales tactics, and they work. It's very interesting. I thought you did a great job of just, when I was reading your book, I was like, oh my God, she is everything that was going on. And
she's a grifter.
It was exactly what Keith was doing.
Including legit stealing from all these other modalities and claiming it as her own, like she just came up with it. I mean, I guess, did she pay much? And that was the next one. Was tribute given to the other places where she took, like, even though orgasmic meditation, did she say, I got this from Morehouse?
It's interesting. So, again, for those who aren't familiar, the background is basically that Nicole Daedone learned about this meditative clitoral stroking from two other groups that were kind of these two other groups that were started in the Bay Area in the late 60s and the 80s. And they also taught a meditative clitoral stroking practice called deliberate orgasm. And it had some similarities and then a few differences. And Nicole studied with people who had learned at both of these groups and then kind of decided to strike out on her own and make OneTaste and sell orgasmic meditation, which was kind of her version of it, in which she was really the face of orgasmic meditation. And earlier on, she did, like if you look at her bio from the 2000s, she makes reference to Vic Barranco, the leader of OneTaste, and she talks about, she makes some overtures to having studied elsewhere. And I don't think if you had asked her directly, did you get orgasmic meditation? Right. Did it come to you in a dream or something? I don't think she would have lied about that. But she did tell a different story on stage. You always have to have the cocktail party version of your origin story. She had a different origin story in which she went to a party, met a Buddhist monk, and he showed her this practice. So, even in the cocktail party story, she doesn't say that she invented it. But she doesn't really invite you to ask about where it came from. And she does present herself as having studied it to an extent that it gives her special knowledge and special access to the orgasmic energy that comes through doing a lot of oming.
Would you say that because she's, for lack of a way of putting it, she's demonstrated that by doing when you start your book, I think it was an hour long?
Yeah. So the opening
session?
of the book
I don't know how you do that for an hour. That's crazy.
It is a feat of
endurance,
to
say the least.
Performance. And I don't mean that in an insincere way, but I do, I think she is someone who is very comfortable on stage. She's very compelling with the stage presence. And earlier in the OneTaste years, she would do, the book opens with a scene of her doing a demonstration of orgasmic meditation, kind of a advanced level one that goes much beyond the 15 minutes. It lasts about 45 minutes, close to an hour.
I think that would give her some cachet maybe in some way.
100%.
It's hey, this is what it could be.
Yes,
right?
I think when she does a demo and she shows this really she is fully in it. She's moaning and twitching and, they're bringing people up. They're bringing up observers during the demo to watch her up close, to put their hands on her leg, to feel the orgasmic energy being channeled through her. She looks like she is channeling an otherworldly force and is the vehicle by which this, metaphysical force is entering our plane. I don't mean to exaggerate it. Really, having seen the video, it's pretty shocking. And I think in doing so, I think it's fair to say that in doing so, she is showing her followers that she has access to something that maybe you can sense, but that you don't understand. And I would venture to say that the unspoken promise there is that if you follow her, you will come to understand this thing. You will come to understand this thing that could change your life.
And guys, don't you want to know how to achieve this?
Well, what's interesting is in the book, there's a moment where there's actually one of her mentors, this older man who has studied deliberate orgasm quite extensively under Morehouse. He was really interested in trying to train Nicole to give her some of the knowledge that he had picked up over the years about how to run one of these groups. And so he writes out this document that has some of his teachings in it. And one of them is that the benefit of doing an orgasmic meditation demo is that the women in the audience will look at the woman being stroked and think I want to be her. And then the men will look at her and think, I want to know how to evoke that response in someone. So it is this pull for anyone who's watching, regardless of your gender. Yeah.
It's power for both.
This episode would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. Let's hear what they have to offer.
The world is full of tours. But you don't choose a Toyota truck to follow the beaten path. You choose it to find the places in between. The detours, where each adventure pulls you toward the next. And wrong turns turn out right. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota Trucks.
Between crowded airports, darker days with daylight savings, and end-of-year stress, it's easy to fall behind on important things like staying healthy. That's why I stay one scoop ahead with AG1, the daily foundational nutrition drink that helps my body keep up when life gets hectic. When Nibby and I first opened our first package from AG1, we literally fought over the little bottle, the shaker bottle, and I immediately took our D3 and K2 drops. AG1 is loaded with antioxidants, probiotics, and functional mushrooms to support immune resilience. And I love the packets for when we're traveling over the holidays. Superfoods and B vitamins help me sustain my energy levels without feeling the crash, while over 70 high-quality ingredients fill those nutrition gaps in one fell scoop. When stress hits hard, AG1's prebiotics, probiotics, and enzymes support a balanced gut, which means better regularity, stronger immunity, and a calmer mind. I love starting my day with AG1. It helps me feel refreshed, resilient, and ready to take on whatever is next. As the year winds down, don't fall behind. Stay one scoop ahead with AG1. Head to ag1.com/culty to get a free welcome kit with an AG1 flavor sampler and a bottle of vitamin D3 plus K2 when you first subscribe. That's drinkag1.com/culty. Enjoy! Did you skip over all the ads? We hope you didn't. Thank you to our sponsors and thank you for listening. Now, let's resume our culty convo. Thank you for summarizing that history. It is complex. And actually, one of the reasons why we haven't even covered this sooner is as I started to dig, I was like, wait, what's Morehouse and what's this community and that community? And I think your book will probably become sort of the
go-to book
on OneTaste, because I know there's probably going to be a lot of memoirs coming out and whatnot, but like you really cover it all, similar to our mutual friend Sarah Berman's Don't Call It a Cult on NXIVM in terms of the journalistic approach, right? Yeah. This is what happened. And it's very thorough. And if anyone wants to know the history, read the book is what I'm trying to say. So tell us a little bit about your journey from like, oh, I'm going to report on this thing to, discovering there's French maid clad women serving people cocktails and sorry, that's just to be clear, that's Morehouse.
Yeah, that's Morehouse. Yeah, I know it's hard to get the French maid image out of your head. Okay, so my connection with OneTaste dates back to 2017, which is, at the time I was a reporter at Bloomberg News and I was covering startups and I was working in San Francisco and I got a call from a woman who works in PR who I had talked to briefly for a different story. And she called me up and she said, hey, I have a story idea for you. I have a new client. They are a fast-growing sexual wellness company run by women. You might have heard of them. They teach this thing called orgasmic meditation. Are you interested in learning more? And I had actually heard about OneTaste. I had read an article about them several years ago. And it's not something that you forget, like the 15-minute clitoral stroking people. Yeah. Like you tend to remember that. So I was intrigued and I ended up going to have an initial meeting with the CEO at the time, which was actually not Nicole. Nicole had recently sold the company and sold all her shares. And so there was new leadership in the company. And I went and had a nice chat with them. We talked about orgasmic meditation. They described how they basically called OneTaste and the whole foods of sexuality. So they were really pitching it as this is a wholesome version of sexuality. And at the time, Me Too was kind of just picking up steam, and they were actually pitching OneTaste and orgasmic meditation as a way for people to better tap into the subtleties of sexual interactions, I think. They were basically pitching it as hey, this could be actually a Me Too antidote. Anyway, so I ended up looking around on my own to talk to people who had been involved in OneTaste as well, and ended up getting connected to someone who had been a former customer and someone who had been pretty involved. And they told me their experience, and they were basically actually had a pretty terrible experience. I feel like there were predatory sales, this and that, and I was surprised. And then I ended up looking for more people and then finding more people and ending up feeling like I had stumbled upon this side of the company that had there had been some past stories that had suggested that maybe there were some cultish dynamics, but nothing too serious. And then all of a sudden I had on my hands many people, over a dozen, who were telling me that they had very complicated experiences, or that they were calling it a cult, or that they were calling it predatory and harmful. And I spent probably 6 months on the story, ended up writing this story in 2018, so 7 years ago, published this story about, really detailing some of these cult allegations about OneTaste and these allegations that the company had exploited its customers and employees, sexually, financially. We haven't really talked about the financially part so much, but, people alleged that they were pressured to take on debt in order to buy increasingly expensive OneTaste courses. And it was a pretty fascinating reporting experience. And after that first story came out, a few things happened. First, the company went into what I would describe as a kind of hibernation. They stopped offering in-person classes. They closed some of their centers. I think they were trying to figure out how to respond. The second thing that happened was a couple months later, I heard from some of my sources that the FBI had showed up at their door and started asking questions about what had happened at OneTaste. And that's kind of the first step to an investigation. And then the third thing that happened was that I heard from a lot more people who had been involved in OneTaste and who wanted to tell their story, or what were telling me, there's so much more to the story. You got to talk about Nicole's history. You got to understand all these other things that happened that your story didn't even have the space to touch on. So that was my first signal that there might be more to this story. And I ended up, I wrote some follow-up stories about the FBI investigation. And then basically a couple years later, I decided I was okay, I'm going to write a book. And then the next few years, it was this parallel process of me reporting on the book, me trying to do a lot of reaching out to people who had been involved in all these different eras of the company. And meanwhile, it was the FBI just kept investigating. And it was COVID. It was the early years of COVID. And they were still the two agents who were investigating this, which, by the way, the And it ended up coming from the same like regional office as the
Eastern District.
people who did, Eastern District of New York. So kind of like Brooklyn and other parts. And anyway, so the agents kept investigating, but it was never really clear if anything was going to happen. And I was working on the book. I was like, okay, who knows? Because an FBI investigation, first of all, they don't say anything publicly about it. Second of all, you just don't know
what they're going to find.
Yeah, they might decide not to indict or not to do anything with it. So 5 years later, in 2023,
5 years later,
they indicted Nicole and Rachel Turwoods, who again was kind of her second in command, this woman who had been the head of sales for many years at OneTaste. They indicted both of them with forced labor conspiracy. And then that set off a whole process of like preparing for a trial. And then there was a trial this summer in New York, again in Brooklyn, where, for 5 weeks, all these witnesses came and testified about what they had experienced at OneTaste. Sorry, so my involvement is like, it was all happening in parallel that I was working on this book while this was happening. But I definitely did not anticipate when I first wrote that story how long I would be researching this subject and the ripple effects of some of that original reporting. I could not have anticipated that.
Interesting.
Yeah, you've had quite a journey. Let's pause and we'll come back on Thursday for a deeper dive into your experience at the trial and your opinions on that whole experience. But also let's dig into, when we get back, a bit about because you were a writer on startups. You weren't a cult writer. You didn't know probably anything about cults. So what that journey was like, how you learned what all the specifics were. And then let's dig into some of the practices at OneTaste that were definitely a little bit culty.
For sure. Let's do that.
See you Thursday.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Retherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Lesli Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Namoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.
Shopify's point of sale system helps you sell at every stage of your business. Need a fast and secure way to take payments in person? We've got you covered. How about card readers you can rely on anywhere you sell?
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yep, that too. Want one place to manage all your online and in-person sales? That's kind of our thing. Wherever you sell, businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/listen. Shopify.com/listen.
You know those moments in life that just knock the wind out of you? The ones that force you to figure out who you really are, whether you wanted to or not? That's what Hard Knocks is all about. It's hosted by Amanda Knox. Yes, that Amanda Knox. And it's a show about resilience, self-discovery, and finding meaning after chaos.
Each week, Amanda talks with fascinating guests, writers, scientists, artists, and thinkers, all exploring how we rebuild ourselves when life goes sideways. She brings humor, honesty, and the kind of perspective you only earn by surviving the unimaginable.
If you're into conversations that mix big ideas like mindfulness, agency, and joy with raw human stories that actually make you feel something, you'll love Hard Knocks.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Hard Knocks with Amanda Knox.